I was the star of Dr. Wallace Adventure Club, a children's show that doesn't exist. Part 4. A story by user like I did. I was young. Not much older than you guys are now. An agent told me they needed an actor for a revolutionary kids show. And while entertaining children in a damned place like Wotton felt beneath me, I did need the money. The only reason I could bear it was by being high as a kite on set. That entire year is just a huge blur in my memory. I always thought it was the drugs, but now I'm starting to understand that there is a lot more to it. Whoever these people are, they are dangerous. But I guess you've realized that by now. What brought you to the diner in the first place? How about you answer our questions first? Wally, Lee hissed. We had taken our old acting colleague with us and drove to a coffee shop in the center of Wotton. A public place with many people around felt safer for now, until we figured out what he was all about. You realize Wally isn't my actual name, right? He rolled his eyes and sighed. Anyway, for years I had forgotten about the show altogether. I've been living with my sister in Marden, and the other day we got some vouchers for a new diner. I drove down there to get some food, but as soon as I stepped inside, I heard a melody coming from the speakers inside the diner. Dun dun doo doo dun, Lee and I sang in unison. Please don't, Wally said with a disgusted look on his face. But yeah, that song. I turned right around and left. I wasn't sure why, but at that moment that sound just made me feel sick. Like it triggered some PTSD or whatever. On my way home, the memories came back. I called my agent from back then and asked if she still had any copies of the show. She sent me a tape right away, but I could make absolutely no sense of it. It was even worse than I remembered. So I thought I'd show it to my niece. She's 8 and I figured maybe I don't get it cause I'm too old. What did she see? Wallace's expression darkened. His eyes started watering. I have no clue. All I know is that she was basically glued to the screen and even talked to it. I was there the whole time. I still don't understand what she was seeing. You guys were there and the 2 girls, but everything you said was random slurs. He sniffed. That night something happened. My niece disappeared. We don't know how it happened, but the next morning she wasn't in her bed and she didn't come home again. The police couldn't find her. There were no clues left. She even took her shoes. They don't know what happened, but I do. This show does something awful to children. He started staring into the distance. The 3 of us stayed silent. To any other people, Wallace's story would have sounded like madness, but we knew better. We had seen the tape. Of course, the first one they blame is the ex-junkie uncle, and I get it. But I had nothing to do with it, I swear. The whole mess is repeating itself, Wally finally whispered. So the rumors are true? Helen asked. I heard about it back when we were filming. I never believed it, if I'm honest. It sounded like bullshit. Stuff like that happens a lot around here. Wotton isn't exactly a safe place, but when the little blue girl was taken years later. Wait, what blue girl? Are you talking about Millie? I almost shouted. Lee looked as shocked as I did. You don't remember? Wally asked. Although as he said those words, something was coming back to me. I remembered meeting them again. But we were older. 15 maybe? Lee was there, Janie and Millie too. Was that the last time I talked to her? We had a reunion, Lee whispered as if he had just read my mind. Wally nodded. There was a discussion about bringing the show back. For an older audience. Alex here had moved away and I was pretty opposed to it, but the network pressured us to talk about it again. A week after that, the girl vanished and that was the end of the discussion. Apparently she left a goodbye note, but they couldn't make much sense of it. My hands started trembling. This was getting too real. We were children, but you weren't. You were an adult. How could you let any of this happen? I shouted. Wally hit his fist on the table, making the cups in front of us spill. Do you think I would have let my little niece watch this shit if I knew? I had forgotten, just like you, but I've spent day and night researching, trying to remember. Lee put a hand on my shoulder. My heart was still racing. Quiet guys, you're attracting a lot of attention right now, Helen whispered. We paid the check and got back into the car. This doesn't mean that we did it, Lee whispered in my ear as we made our way to the car. We don't know what really happened to her. We got back to the car and I started driving. We were heading to Lee's home first where we would drop off Helen. He didn't like his grandpa being alone for too long and Helen volunteered to go back and take care of him. Lee and I would then go somewhere quiet to chat to Wally some more. While we didn't believe that he was exactly dangerous right now, Lee also didn't want him in his home, which was understandable. I tried contacting my old agent again, but she disappeared. I haven't been able to reach her since she sent me that tape. Guys, the show doesn't exist. I'm starting to understand it now. The reason I only remember filming that first scene isn't only because I was high during the other days. It's because we never filmed anything else. The reason they cast us was probably because you kids didn't have any support systems and all of us were troubled in some way. Wally spoke from the back seat. My grandparents were just happy I had found a hobby after Mum and Dad died, Lee mumbled. And my mum was a drunk who didn't care much about anything at all, I confessed. And I was a wannabe actor on drugs, Wally continued. I have no idea what happened when we were at that studio, boys, but I've watched the tape often enough now to know that those creatures in the show aren't us. They just used our faces. That's what I thought, Helen said. It just doesn't look real. Maybe they used some computer techniques to make those scenes. That must be it. They used us for the normal introduction, maybe as a pilot, and for the rest they plastered our faces on something alien. We're at my home, Lee chimed in. All right, I'll see you later guys, and keep me updated, Helen said and opened the door, and don't do anything stupid. She winked and pointed at Lee's hand, which was still bruised from punching Wally. Who is that girl, by the way? Girlfriend of one of you? Wally asked in a dry tone. Helen? No, she's an old friend of mine, I responded. And you trust her? He asked. You should be careful about that. You know, until this point I actually hadn't doubted Helen's intentions. I've known her for years, but it did seem a little strange that she came all the way here with me to investigate a horror show which makes children disappear or even die. We trust her more than we trust you, dude. She didn't host a creepy kids show, Lee answered instead of me. And now let's get out of here. If that thing about us and the faces is true, I mean, if those things in there aren't really us, does that mean we didn't kill anyone? I carefully asked as the three of us drove to the closest gas station. Is that what you saw? Lee and I both avoided eye contact. Right, Wally said. Honestly, I don't know, boys. But I might have an idea how we can find out more. What is it? I asked. Well, obviously we shouldn't go back to that diner, but there is another place we could check. One right in Marden. I remember where the studio is. The one where we filmed the Adventure Club. It was an impulsive decision, but it made so much sense. I don't know why we didn't think of it sooner. While the studio might not give us all the answers, at least it could freshen up our memory. The studio was on a pretty quiet street. There were an old cinema and a small restaurant, but we didn't see many people. The building of the studio itself looked run down as if it hadn't been used in years. Are you sure that's a good idea? How will we even get inside? I asked. Yeah, looks kinda abandoned, Lee added. So what, we'll break in, Wally said as he walked towards the door. He got something out of his pocket and started fidgeting with the lock. After a few minutes, we heard a loud breaking sound. "Ta-da!" Wally exclaimed and smiled. Easy peasy. It was pretty rusty. Wally walked inside and waved us to follow. Lee shrugged and walked inside. I stayed behind for a moment. It felt like a big deal for me to go back to the place that I had forgotten for such a long time. I needed a moment to collect myself. Go ahead, I'm just gonna check on Alex, I heard Lee's voice say from inside the building. He pushed me outside, closed the door of the building behind him quickly, and whispered, "We need to go," as he grabbed my arm. We rushed to the car as fast as we could, but Wally was already coming back outside, his eyes glaring at us. He shouted something and ran towards the car. We made it inside just in time to lock the doors. Wally wasn't alone. A woman had followed him outside. Everything was happening too fast for me to understand what was going on. Go! Lee shouted and we drove off. What the fuck happened in there? I shouted. We were both panting. Lee held up his phone, which had a text from Helen. I just realized I had left my own phone at his home. Helen, get away from Wally. I don't know what it's about, but his reaction makes me think we got out of there just in time. Did you see that woman? Dude, I think I remember her. She was my agent, Lee said in between breaths. My eyes opened wide. That was the woman who would take me to the studio all the time. Call Helen, now, I commanded. Guys, where are you? Is Wally with you? She asked over the speaker. No, we got rid of him. What the hell happened? I was watching the tape again. I just had to. And then I realized something. It might be nothing, but it seems weird. What? Lee and I both shouted at the same time. You know how your faces are normal in the intro, but then change later? It happens for the four of you, but not for Wally. He's in the video later again, and he looks exactly the same. Didn't he say he only filmed the intro? And there was something else too. We followed him in his trap. Lee interrupted her. Helen, you need to get out of there. He knows where I live. Please take my grandpa and get the hell away. Helen dropped off Lee's grandpa at a nursing home in a different town. A place where he would be safe for now. We didn't want him involved in all of this. What was the other thing you wanted to say about Wally when we talked on the phone, Helen? I got so worried about my grandpa we had no chance to finish talking then. Lee asked. The three of us met up again at a motel, hopefully far enough away from Watton. We still had to figure out our next steps, but for now this place seemed safer than Lee's house. Yes. Shit, I almost forgot to tell you. Her eyes opened wide as she quickly got up from the bed. We were in such a hurry when we left the diner this morning, but I noticed a woman at the door. Oh yeah, I saw her as well, I said. Did you see her face? Not really. I did, and she looked kinda familiar, but I couldn't place her until I watched that tape again. I mean, she's gotten older and everything, but I think it was Millie.
That was the fourth part of this story. What is Wally up to? Who was the woman stalking the group? Was it really Millie from the tapes? To get the updates for this story, share and subscribe this channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part. And also, do not forget to like and share this video, and comment down below on what you think about the story. Thank you for tuning in on our latest story here at the Double Dutchman. Till our next episode, we'll see you there.